I worked as a mall security guard for about 6 months after getting out of the army, and for the most part it was an easy job. I'm 6'1", and at the time I was very fit, so the teenagers who might have otherwise caused problems really didn't mess with me. The mall wasn't ever super busy except for holidays, and most of the time I just patrolled the hallways and talked to various store owners. Nothing out of the ordinary at all happened during the first 2 months I was there, but that all changed one day. I was patrolling through our mall's JCPenney when one of the employees asked if I could help her take one of the kid carts back. For anyone who's never seen them, a lot of malls have these small shopping cart-like things that parents push as their kids sit inside. Usually you have to put money into a machine before you can take the cart out, and if you return the cart it'll give you $1 or $2 back. For that reason, most people who rented the carts return them, though it wasn't uncommon for a customer to just leave a cart at an exit rather than walk all the way back to return it. Anyway, I followed the lady down several aisles, initially confused as to why she needed my help to take the cart back, but then I saw it. Sandwiched between 2 different shelves was one of the carts, only it didn't make sense how it could have gotten there. The cart and shelves were located in this little corner type area, and there was a pretty heavy display case in front of the shelves, blocking them from being moved. As the lady and I worked together to move stuff out of the way, I wondered how someone, or more likely a group of people, was able to get the cart stuck here without being noticed. It took like 5 minutes just to move everything, but finally I managed to wedge the cart out and the employee thanked me repeatedly. Then I took the cart back to the cart machine near one of the entrances and that was that. Cut forward a few weeks and I was working a night shift. During night shifts, we'd have to walk back and forth across the mall and press these buttons in each of 2 rooms. It was like 4:30 in the morning and I was trying to keep myself awake. Towards the end of what I think was my second to last patrol, I saw something in the distance. I wasn't immediately freaked out, but it was unusual since I hadn't noticed it there before. I shined my flashlight over and saw that it was a kid cart. That was strange, as I was now 95% sure it hadn't been there before, especially since I'd already walked through the lower level like 5 times tonight. I didn't really have an explanation, so I just chalked it up to a lack of sleep and started taking the cart back to one of the machines. As I walked back, I could swear I heard these very low sounds in the distance, but they were too faint to make out. The noises didn't sound like they were coming from a person, and I assumed they had something to do with the mall's ventilation system, though I'm not sure why I didn't notice them before. Finally, at the end of my shift, I was able to clock out and go home. I ended up not telling anyone about the cart because, well, I didn't really know what to say. I told myself that a lack of sleep made me not realize the cart was there before, and also made me a little paranoid and started hearing the noises, and then went to bed. Another 2 weeks or so passed, and this time I was working a day shift when I got a call from management about someone reporting seeing a kid cart stuck somewhere by the fountain. For reference, the mall had this large circular fountain in the middle by the food court. The fountain had these brick planters around it and benches around the planters. I walked over, expecting to see a cart wedged up on one of the benches or planters, but instead the cart was fully inside of the fountain close to the middle. Similar to the cart in the JCPenney, I wondered just how no one could notice this, especially with it being in the middle of the day with a fair number of people in the food court. As I stood there deciding how best to retrieve it, a few bystanders started watching me. One of them even said they felt sorry I had to go in and get it. I turned and asked them if anyone had seen who put the cart in, but no one did. I also scanned the food court, looking for any groups of teenagers, but no one stuck out. I figured there was no way I could get the cart without getting my feet wet, so I went over to one of the maintenance areas that had rubber boots. I had to search for the boots and returned about 15 minutes later, but then the cart was gone. I looked around, dumbfounded. Again I scanned the food court, this time sure a group of people was messing with me, but again no one stuck out. None of the people who I had talked to previously were still there, and after questioning a few of the patrons seated nearby, no one reported seeing anyone get a cart out of the fountain. Now I was starting to question my sanity. After taking care of 1 or 2 more things, I began to review the surveillance tapes, and what I found was shocking. Or rather, what I didn't find. There was a camera pointed almost directly at the fountain, and I saw myself walk up, look at the cart, and talk to the people nearby. But almost immediately after I left, the video cut off. There were 2 or 3 minutes of blackness, and then the video abruptly cut back on, with the cart nowhere to be seen. I brought this up to management, who didn't seem super interested, but did at least look into it. Part of why this was so strange is because our surveillance system worked pretty well, and I'd never seen it glitch out like that before. The camera pointing at the fountain was also in a location where it would be hard to mess with, and it didn't look like anyone had messed with it. Long story short, no one had a good explanation. The final incident happened on another night shift about a month before I quit. I'd been accepted to the police academy and had started dating my future wife, so overall things were going really well for me. I wouldn't say I was paranoid or on edge about what happened before, but I did feel a bit unnerved whenever I was alone in the mall at night. Similar to the last time something happened, the start of this shift was completely normal. Then around 2 a.m., I heard a distinct squeaking sound from somewhere in the distance. My mind immediately went to the carts and I felt my heart rate rise. I was on the upper floor and walked over to the balconies, where I shined my light down to where I thought the sound came from. There was another one of those carts. Just like before, I had been patrolling the mall since near the start of my shift, and I was sure I would have seen that cart before now. It wasn't like it was hidden behind one of the kiosks or benches. It was literally in the middle of the hallway. I began to genuinely consider the idea that I wasn't alone, and that someone may have broken into the building. If that was the case, it was obviously my responsibility to deal with them too. I scanned my surroundings with a flashlight, but saw no one. I didn't immediately get the cart, but rather walked back over to the surveillance room. Just like before, I was stunned. The feed from the camera closest to where the cart was had cut out not even 5 minutes ago. I knew someone had to be messing with me, but who? None of my other coworkers nor the shop owners remotely seemed like the type of people to pull some really elaborate prank like this. Even so, at that moment I decided it would be best to confront whoever was there. I went over and turned the hallway lights on, then walked back to that same area on the balcony and loudly commanded whoever was there to show themselves. Those words echoed down the hallway, and fear began to take hold of me. Everything was dead quiet, and somehow seeing everything lit up but completely deserted was even more unsettling. I walked around to the escalators, then walked down to the lower level and got the cart. Before taking it back, I inspected it for anything out of the ordinary. Like, maybe whoever was messing with me would have left a note, I don't know. But there was nothing. As I pushed the cart back down the hallway to the machine at the entrance to the lower level, the sound of the wheels echoed off the walls. I tried my best to listen above the sound, but I couldn't really hear anything. The cart clicked back into place as I pushed it into the machine, and then everything was dead quiet again. There wasn't much else to do besides resume my patrols and mention to the day team that I had suspected a possible intruder but couldn't find anyone. We were supposed to keep the main lights off during the night, but I decided to leave them on for at least my next walk through the building. After I finished it, I returned to the control room and turned the lights out. I also went to the surveillance room to check on the camera that had cut off. But what I saw through the monitor is still one of the most terrifying sights of my entire life. There, in almost the exact same position, was another cart. My blood ran cold as I forced myself to sit down in the chair and review the footage. Apparently it just came back on 2 minutes ago, after I turned the lights off, and the cart was already there. Now I knew for sure I wasn't alone in that building. I called the cops and told them someone had broken into the mall and was hiding somewhere. The operator asked me for a description, but obviously I couldn't give her one. She said she'd send someone out, and while waiting for them to arrive, I started checking the recordings from each of the other cameras. I saw myself walking around at various points, and the lights go on and off, but nothing else. 2 cops showed up 15 minutes later, and we all searched the building with the lights on. Only the store owners had keys to the individual stores, so we couldn't go inside, but we did verify that each of the gates was still locked. All the outside doors were locked as well, including both the public and employee entrances and the loading bays. We looked in each of the kiosks as well as behind the planters and fountains, and anywhere else we thought someone could hide. But no one was there. It was almost 5 o'clock at this point, and as we literally checked everywhere, there wasn't anything else to do. I'm not sure what the 2 cops thought of this encounter, but they seemed to believe me that someone could have snuck in. FYI, I didn't mention the backstory about what had been happening with the carts. I thanked them for helping me search the building, and they told me to call again if I thought that person returned. I obviously had to fill out an incident report and bring this up to management. As nothing appeared to be broken into or stolen, they didn't seem super concerned, but they did acknowledge what I told them. One of the managers assured me that the surveillance system would be checked and that they'd take steps to discourage shoppers from misusing the carts. Maybe because they thought I was imagining things and didn't want to have to deal with me, they let me avoid doing the night shift from there on out. I honestly didn't care, and finished out my last month without anything else happening. I've since graduated from the police academy and have been on the force for 5 years. So far I've been in my share of intense situations, but nothing still compares to what I witnessed in the mall in terms of strangeness. In case you were wondering, I happen not to believe in the paranormal. To this day I feel like someone had to be messing with me somehow, though admittedly I don't know why or how. But if this really was something like a ghost, I have no idea why they chose to go after me. Back in the day, my friends and I were kind of troublemakers. Our group consisted of myself along with 3 other guys named Jake, Owen, and Tim, and we commonly hang out at our local mall, especially during the summer. There were various activities we liked to do, including filming prank videos and messing with people. And looking back now, it's pretty embarrassing, and I'm glad we didn't get into more serious trouble. The mall had this rather large golf store, complete with clubs, caddies, golf carts, and even a small enclosed area where people could try out the various clubs. In addition to messing with people trying to take shots, we would consistently get on the carts and pretend like we were racing. Needless to say, the store owners weren't pleased with our shenanigans, but even though they banned us from the store, without employees watching the entrance, we could still get inside. That is, until one day. At the start of the summer after our junior year, the golf place hired this guy named Eddie. Eddie was a tall and thin kid. Right from the get-go, he was extremely awkward. He'd make these lame jokes, all in a very loud voice. I'm not sure if they hired him specifically to deal with us, but either way, Eddie quickly made it his mission to ensure we didn't set one foot inside the store. He must have checked the front frequently, or else monitored the cameras, because literally any time we'd get within 15 feet of the store, he'd walk directly into the middle of the open doors. Then he'd put out his arms while making this goofy expression. As you might have guessed, messing with him soon became our mission, and whenever we'd say something to him, he'd usually come back with something incredibly cringe. For example, one time Owen told Eddie to thank his mom for last night, and Eddie said something like, it had to be at night because she wouldn't want to look at you. Yeah, what he said didn't always make sense, but that only added to our desire to mess with him. Looking back, I do feel really stupid. Eddie could have been dealing with some serious issues for all we knew, and I cringed thinking about us messing with him as well as other random strangers in the mall. This went on for practically the entire summer, but near the end of it we noticed Eddie starting to act differently. Now, instead of trying to make comebacks, he'd just stand there and say, "You need to leave," over and over again. Honestly, it made our encounters with him seem rather boring, and was effective at making us lose interest. I think a week before school started, we decided to have one last hurrah and see if we could sneak into the golf store again. We came up with this stupid plan where Jake and Owen would serve as a distraction, and Tim and I would wear hats, jackets, and glasses and try to slip in unnoticed. Of course, it being 80 degrees out would make us automatically suspicious, but we didn't care. By the time we made our way over to the store, the 4 of us were already starting to crack up. Instinctively, we waited for Eddie to walk into the doorway and block our way, but he didn't. Out of the 15 times we'd been there since Eddie started, this was the first time he wasn't there. Tim and I convinced Jake and Owen to stand guard at the front and distract Eddie if he showed up while we went in to mess with the golf carts. So Tim and I started to walk down one of the aisles to where the golf cart displays were near the back of the store. There were a few other people throughout the store, but none of them said anything to us even though we were dressed ridiculously and were laughing. Tim and I kept expecting Eddie to pop out at any moment, but he didn't though. Half a minute later we reached the carts, and I got on one while Tim got on another, and we started shaking the steering wheels violently and pretending we were racing. Then all of a sudden, Tim stopped. I instinctively looked at him, waiting for him to continue whatever joke he was playing, but he just sat there. I got up and walked over to him, and then saw what he was looking at. It was Eddie. Eddie was standing motionless in one of the aisles, and he was holding a gun. Tim and I both made a gesture with our hands as he stood up and we started to back away. Eddie watched us as we went back up one of the aisles until we left his field of view. He didn't follow us though. We got back to the front and Owen started joking about how Eddie already kicked us out. Then Tim said, "Dude, he's got a gun," but Owen didn't believe him. I tried to back Tim up, but when Owen still didn't take us seriously, I said we should go. I asked Owen where Jake was, and he told us Jake had gone into the store after us. Tim and I were considering going in to look for him when all three of us heard Jake say, "Dude," very loudly from somewhere in the store. People gasped and one lady started screaming. We saw Jake come running back one of the aisles, and then we saw Eddie driving one of the golf carts. Jake met up with us and we started running down the mall. Luckily it wasn't crowded at this time of day, but a second later Eddie came through the doorway and drove after us. The mall was all on one level, so there weren't any escalators or stairs we could use to get away from him. Therefore, we just kept running to one of the exits. A few people shouted either at us or at Eddie, and I'm pretty sure that included one of the main mall security guards. We didn't care though, we just kept running, and we prayed that Eddie wouldn't shoot at us or follow us out the doors. This whole time he was only like 30 feet behind us, and he also didn't say anything. Finally we got to the doors and ran out into the parking lot. We started cutting between cars, and when we thought we were far enough away, we peeked around the side of a truck and looked for Eddie. He wasn't there. Luckily Owen had parked near the same entrance, so we went farther down the aisle we were in and then cut over and got to his car. Driving back, in addition to thanking God we didn't get shot, we kept thinking about all the trouble we were in. We fully expected to start getting texts or calls at any minute, and even when we didn't get them by the time Owen dropped us off, we suspected our families would already know. However, by some miracle, we never got caught. Either none of the mall cops or bystanders could identify us, or they were too preoccupied with Eddie. They did report what happened on the local news, but there was no actual footage of the chase. My friends and I didn't go back to the mall for a long while, and we gave up on messing with random people for good. I heard through word of mouth that Eddie stopped working at the golf store immediately after the incident, and I have no idea what happened to him after that. It's not pleasant to think about how stupid me and my friends were, and how there was a very real possibility that we messed up Eddie's life and perhaps almost got ourselves or other random bystanders shot. Hopefully the story can serve as a deterrent for any other would-be pranksters like ourselves. And wherever you are, Eddie, I'm sorry. The mall where I grew up had a 24-hour convenience store built into it, which had both an entrance on the outside of the building and an entrance leading to inside the mall. I ended up working there briefly after my sophomore year and also after my junior year, and while things were uneventful for the most part, what happened at the very end is still the most horrifying experience of my life. On weeknights, almost all the shops closed down by 8 o'clock. The mall also had a movie theater and a fancy restaurant nearby, each of which had doors leading directly outside, but otherwise the entrances to the mall were locked and the main lights were turned off. There was a security guard on duty, at least for the first part of the night, because sometimes a group of teens would sneak through one of the doors by the restaurant or movie theater and had to be escorted out. Our convenience store was on the other side of the central area from the movie theater, so I could watch people leave if I wanted to. Our interior door was locked after hours though, and the metal gate was pulled down. The last showings at the theater usually ended around midnight, so from then until about 7 a.m., the inside of the mall was completely dark and deserted. It was a similar story on the convenience store side of things. There'd usually be a few customers in the early part of the night, but it was rare for anyone to come in after 11. Honestly, I'm not sure why they kept the place open 24/7, but as it was easy money, I didn't complain. Besides a bit of stock work, there was basically nothing I had to do. Because I was a rather petite high school girl, my parents insisted I keep pepper spray on me, but given our area, I didn't really fear for my safety. I remember it was a Thursday night near the end of summer, and the start of my shift was completely uneventful. The main lights in the mall turned off at 8:30, and the last group of people left the theater around 11:30. The last customer in our store came just before the theater let out, so once again I was completely on my own. I'm not sure if there was a security guard on duty somewhere, but either way, I never saw anyone patrolling either inside the mall or outside in the parking lot. As usual, I was on my phone texting a few of my friends and browsing social media. Then, around 1 a.m., I heard this unusual high-pitched sound. At first I couldn't tell what it was, though I was sure it was not the sound of a car parking outside. Rather, it seemed to come from somewhere inside, as in, inside the mall. I walked over to the interior doors and stared through the metal gate. It was almost pitch black, save for a few safety lights and some of those exit signs. I couldn't see anything, and chalked it up to something to do with the air conditioning, which did start randomly sometimes. I'd almost walked back to behind the counter where I'd been sitting when I heard the noise again. I still couldn't tell what it was, but now it seemed more deliberate, and I felt my heart rate start to rise. I walked back to the gate and started looking again, then almost screamed. There, just barely lit up by one of the exit signs by the movie theater, was the silhouette of a person. I immediately got creeped out at how they were standing perfectly still, and the possibility that they could be a security guard didn't really cross my mind. I still didn't know what that sound was, but a moment later I saw it. That person was holding onto a shopping cart, and they were pushing it away and pulling it back. Now, to the best of my knowledge, none of the stores in the mall use shopping carts, and of course there'd be no reason for someone like a security guard to just be standing in the middle of a mall with one in the dead of night. I figured this person had broken in somehow and was mentally deranged, and I started freaking out as the reality of the situation started to sink in. As I was standing right on the other side of the doors leading into the mall and the lights were on in the store, I assumed that that person knew I was there. I contemplated my options, and slowly started to back away towards the counter, which thankfully was out of view of the interior doors. Then I crept along the side of the store towards the exterior doors and locked them. In case you were wondering why I didn't just run to my car, it's because I had parked on the other side of the building, near the entrance to the restaurant and movie theater. In hindsight, this was a very poor decision, for situations just like this, but that other entrance was closer to where I drove in, and while it was open, I could just walk through the mall. Now that I was locked in, I should have called 911 immediately, but instead I started looking for the phone number for security. I remembered one of the managers showing it to me one time, but couldn't remember where he put the piece of paper. It wasn't by the store phone behind the counter, so I went through the door into the stockroom bathroom area and checked the phone mounted to the wall there. All the while my heart was racing, expecting at any moment to hear some kind of sound coming from the metal gate. There was a corkboard full of notices and other random pieces of paper by the phone in the back area, and after a minute or two of searching, I still couldn't find the number for security. For some reason, I still didn't want to call 911, so instead I peeked my head back around where the counter was and let out a scream. There was the person standing directly on the other side of the doors and gate, facing me. He was a man and looked to be in his mid-30s. He was wearing a plaid shirt and blue jeans, both of which were tattered and had long disheveled hair. However, the most unnerving aspect of his appearance were his eyes, which looked completely insane. I immediately ducked out of view and called 911 on my phone. 10 seconds into the call, I screamed again and dropped the phone as a loud bang came from the metal gate. I started crying as I picked the phone up, and a few seconds later there was another bang, this time accompanied by the sound of breaking glass. I could also make out the sound of what I assumed was the shopping cart the man was ramming into the metal gate. In between the crashes, I pleaded with the operator to send someone as fast as possible while she tried her best to keep me calm. The operator advised I lock myself into the break room or bathroom if they had locks, but while there were locks, I knew that if the man could get through that metal gate, he could break through those doors as well. Therefore, the metal gate was really the only thing between me and that psycho. The next bash came, but this time there was a distinct higher-pitched screeching sound. I poked my head around the corner, and to my horror, I saw some of the bars on the gate had started to bend. The glass from the doors was also completely shattered and had spilled out onto the floor. I sobbed into the phone as the operator again advised me to lock myself in one of the interior rooms. She also advised that I find something to brace the door, but in that moment I couldn't think of anything. Another bash came, and I heard the man rattle the cart as it apparently broke through some of the bars of the gate and got stuck. That was it. I went back through the door to the stockroom and locked it, as well as locked the door to the bathroom. My rationale was that the man would try to look for me there, and it would at least slow him down. Then I made my way to the exterior employees-only exit in the stockroom and locked that behind me too. Even though I was away from that sound, stepping into the almost pitch-black parking lot knowing I had to make my way around the entire building was terrifying as well. I knew the man could break his way through the exterior doors of the convenience store at any moment, or that he could give up and might go back through another door. I ran like there was no tomorrow, and when I saw my car come into view, it was the most beautiful sight in the world. Thank God the man didn't break into it or slash the tires, and it started up right away. I sped all the way home, then ran inside our house. My parents woke up immediately and were hysterical. 5 minutes later, a cop showed up. Only when the cops arrived did I finally feel completely safe. I quit the next day over the phone, and the store owner didn't pressure me and instead seemed apologetic about what happened. I did have to go back to the store, however, as part of the police investigation. The man did manage to break through the metal gate and enter the store, and he also broke into both the door leading to the stockroom and the bathroom door before going back into the mall. Of course I felt vindicated, knowing that my decision to run was the right one. Interestingly, surveillance footage apparently showed the man entering through an unlocked employee entrance somewhere else in the mall a few hours after it closed. But whether he used to work at that store, or how he knew that door would be unlocked, wasn't clear. I still can't help but think back to that encounter, and the sound of him crashing the shopping cart into the metal gate and breaking through the glass. God only knows what his intentions were, whether it was just to rob the store or something to do with me. In the end, I'm just glad I never had to find out.